Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to our daily coverage of the 2022 Iditarod here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. And if you get a chance, check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And please hit that subscribe button so you will never miss an episode, because we air these at all sorts of times. Last night we were on at 7. Tonight it's 4:30 in the afternoon Alaska time. So as we said before, the Iditarod is a 24-hour cycle. So I don't think we'll ever host one at 3 a.m., but you never know. So with that, I have my co-host today, Toni Reitter, calling in from down on the Kenai Peninsula. Toni, how's it going today?
Not too bad. The drive home this morning was great. The roads were dry for most of the way, and so we got home and plenty of time to sit down and at least get set up to continue following the race. I'm still a little groggy from the very busy weekend, but that's Iditarod.
So I have to ask, and I know a lot of fans that follow us on Twitter have followed your trials and tribulations with being a brand new homeowner this summer. I also noticed today that you're setting up your Iditarod corner. I'm just wondering, do you have like a control pad or anything like that? Something really fancy, like one of those 15-screen setups or anything like that?
I wish. Right now I'm working on kind of an Iditarod room in my house. It's not quite set up. So right now I'm just sitting in my living room, and I'll probably start hooking my laptop up this evening to the TV so that I can watch Insider and put the GPS tracker up there so that I can still use my laptop for actual work, but I'll have a screen to keep up and running while I'm doing other work, because I've got over 2,000 photos to go through and catalog and edit. So.
Well, we spoke earlier about the best places to check out Iditarod coverage, whether it be websites or news outlets or whatever. But what is your method of consuming content? Is it the laptop? Is it your phone? Is it a desktop? Is it an iPad? What is your go-to spot for consuming Iditarod stuff?
Yes, all of the above, except for the iPad. I'm not an Apple subscriber, and I don't actually have a tablet. I'm not there yet, but I consume pretty much all that I can. I'll in the evenings I'll watch our local news to see what they're updating on the race. I use my laptop at work. I've got my desktop computer where I have dual screens, and so don't tell my boss. She already knows. I'll put Insider coverage because they have the live feeds. I'll put that on, and that'll just be my background noise for the day while I continue to work, quote unquote work. And then when I'm here at home, I've got my laptop on. I've got my cell phone, tuned to either official coverage, or if I'm using my laptop for that, then I'm on social media. I'm checking out adn.com. I'm checking out all of my favorite kind of news sources for that. But for the most part, it's insider, and then it's social media, because you get it right from the horse's mouth, basically. Now that they've relaxed the contact off the trail rule, and they're able to call home, we get a lot more updates on a lot of their social media sites.
I wonder if anybody is so obsessed with following the race that they get notifications on a smartwatch. Can you just imagine how many pings and dings that you would have if you're getting all of those tweets and replies on a smartwatch?
I wouldn't even be tempted, because it's bad enough that my phone blows up and my battery dies pretty quickly. I'm pretty much plugged into a charger 24/7 during Iditarod for my phone, just because I get so many notifications from things that I'm following, as well as people messaging me, asking questions. I've been getting a lot of questions about a host of different things, and that I'm trying to catalog and figure out, how best to go about answering some of them. I definitely want to talk about later on in the race, once I can kind of research and figure out just exactly what the questions are about. So looking forward to doing that. But I broke my watch band again during Iditarod. So I could not rely on a smartwatch.
Very good. So, guys, we have a sled dog race. We have everybody still on the trail, 49 mushers. From the last time that I refreshed, it looks like Dallas is in first, and pulling up the rear is Lisbeth Norris. So we have folks spread out on the trails from past Rainy Pass to Finger Lake, and then everywhere in between along the trail. And it looks like about half of the field is either in or out of Rainy Pass. Is that a pretty good update?
Yeah, I think so. It looks like there's a good, I'd say there's half, or at least more than half, or at least in Rainy Pass. But you've got your front runners, a lot of familiar names running out of Rainy Pass, some of them camping on the trail. Others are headed to Rohn. And looking at the GPS that I just got going, Ryan Reddington is still leading that pack with Burmeister right behind him.
So we talked yesterday about the first three checkpoints with Yentna, Squintna, and Finger Lake. And today we're going to just mention very quickly Rainy Pass, Rohn, and Nikolai. And it's right around here. Probably in the next day or so, we'll start seeing folks taking their 24-hour rest. That is a mandatory rest in Iditarod. Folks have to take a full 24 hours, and that's where time is adjusted, and we'll talk about that probably tomorrow. But they also are required to take 2 mandatory 8-hour rests, and one of those rests has to be in White Mountain, which is the last major checkpoint on the race. It's I guess checkpoint 2 back. There's a safety roadhouse checkpoint right before Nome, but it looks like Rainy Pass is at mile 153, Rohn is at 188, and Nikolai is at 263. And tomorrow we're also going to talk about the differences between the northern route and the southern route, and where they diverge from each other, and then where they come back. I think that's a pretty interesting story that we want to be sure to share. Now, Rainy Pass and Finger Lake are notorious checkpoints on Iditarod Trail, mainly because right near there are the infamous steps and also the Dazelle Gorge. Can you briefly tell us about that and how they sort of relate to these checkpoints here? And then we're going to talk a little bit about that strategy that everybody is always so interested in.
Sure. So the Happy River Steps and the Dalzell Gorge are two of my favorite areas, just because of the stories that come out of there. I know most mushers don't agree. It's very infamous. There's a lot of technical, from my understanding, a lot of technical driving that has to happen. And if you want to know what a very bad year in the steps and gorge look like, go onto YouTube, search out Jeff King 2014. I think it's just 2014 Iditarod, or even put in Dalzell Gorge, and it's a highlight reel of some of what he experienced. Again, that's the extreme bad year of trail. My understanding is this year is much like last year in that the steps and the gorge are, from reports I've heard, that they're very well maintained. The trail's really good, snow on either side, so they're not having to worry too much about trees and open water, is my understanding. I'll have to look for sure. But so they go from Finger Lake. You'll see a lot of teams sitting there waiting to then go whenever their strategy is to run that section of trail. Some of them like to do it in the dark so they don't see the scariness of the trail. Others like to be able to see where they're going and to be able to miss whatever hazards there are. It's also a little bit warm out there today. So you're going to see a lot of teams choosing to run more at night, but there again, in the heat of the day, the dogs are going to run slower. So again, that also plays into strategy. But once they get past Finger Lake into Rainy Pass, and then they head into Rohn, it's just a lot of technical dog driving. And depending on how the trail is really how fast things go. I'm not seeing too much that suggests that there are problems along that trail. So, and please share any knowledge and wisdom from a musher perspective, Robert, because I'm running out of things to say.
Yeah, those two spots, and again, I have not run Iditarod, but I've had my fair share of interesting technical challenges in my day, and I can't wait to do that section of the trail when it's my time to run this race. It's almost one of those bucket list items for a lot of dog mushers, is to be able to run that portion of the trail. And the steps are called that because it is literally going down pretty much the side of a mountain, and you're taking switchbacks and turns down these so-called steps. And this area of the trail, as Toni mentioned with Jeff King's video that was done several years ago, is probably the most epic part of the trail in terms of coverage and crashes and sleds just being disseminated, and all sorts of things can happen during this time. But an interesting thing is, at least from a musher's perspective, is it really helps if you're towards the front of the pack, because in this section of the trail, it is common to, as you're flying down the side of the mountain, to ride your brake or to ride your drag. So what ends up happening is a large trench forms, and that trench, of course, can freeze and become almost like a luge in the Olympics. So it definitely benefits those first few mushers going through, because it's a much better trail. It's not that trench. You're not just shooting down that chute, kind of holding on for dear life. And I think a lot of times mushers will say, once they get through that section, especially rookie mushers, a lot of times they will say some of the worst part of the race is over. And I know we're going to talk later in our coverage about how the race is sort of divided up into thirds. You have this first third that makes your way to about Rohn, Nikolai, McGrath area. Then you have that middle third, and then you're working your way up towards the Yukon, and then the last third, which is off of the Yukon, and then, of course, the run along the coast. And each one of them has their own strategy, and it's a very fascinating thing to cover about who's doing what where, which leads us into our next topic. And I know this is a topic of a lot of discussion. There's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of holding your cards to the vest type stuff with this, and that is run rest schedules. And I'm going to let you go first, Toni, and then I'll give a quick summary of what I know.
Sure. So it's changed a little bit. It used to be something like run 6 hours, rest 6 hours, and they would really stick to that plan. The strategy would be to rest during the heat of the day and run at night as much as possible, which they still try to stick to it, especially as our temperatures continue to get warmer. Earlier in March, the dogs, they want them to be comfortable and able to run, or not run, but trot at a steady pace without overheating. So really now what we see is more of a, for the first third to 2/3 of the race, you'll see a lot of the mushers doing what they call banking rests. And so they rest them quite a bit more than what you may see later on in the race when they do go to more of that old style schedule of rest 6, but more like rest 4, run 4 type schedule. And that's just basically because these dogs, the way, and I don't really understand the science behind it, but there's been a lot of research. For whatever reason, the Alaskan Husky has an endurance that they recover much quicker than your standard athlete, and they are able to rebound from long runs as long as they have the rest built in. And so you really have to train for your schedule. So whatever they're used to resting, they need to do on the race. And so that's why you hear a lot of the top mushers saying, run your race. It doesn't matter what Dallas Seavey is doing. It doesn't matter what Brent Sass is doing. Do what you know your dogs can do. Stay on your rest schedule, because the sooner you pull the plug on that, the sooner your dogs are not going to perform the way that they need to get you to know.
Yep, you covered a lot of the things that I was going to mention as well. And for folks that are listening, if you're interested in that very unique metabolism, respiratory function of the Alaskan Husky, I urge you guys to go to our library over on dogworksradio.com and check out a couple of the episodes we did with Heather Hewson. She is a researcher that does this for a living at Cornell, and she did some awesome interviews with us that talk about that unique function of the Alaskan Husky. And you're right, Toni, it used to be kind of that old school way, 6 and 6, and then now it's a little bit different than that. And I saw a chart that you commented on where a lot of those top runners are running, 6.5 and resting for 2.5 or so, somewhere around there, and then they're working that into their schedule. And one thing I would like to bring up is the comment that you made where you said that there's really two camps. There are folks that sort of run that conservative style, and you listed some names there. Then you have sort of the wild cards that just sort of think about what they want to do, but they just kind of throw it to the wind and hope for the best. Without mentioning any names, what are your thoughts behind those two?
We've seen them both work, and it seems to be kind of not a crapshoot, but it seems to be what nature throws at the race determines whether or not one is going to benefit more than the other. We've seen some teams that are multiple Iditarod champion finishers or winners, whatever. Can't talk today. We've seen them where they go basically balls to the wall from the beginning to the end, and they make it, and they've won with record times that have now been broken by the more conservative race style of that, first half to 2/3, banking that rest. Dallas Seavey calls it building the monster. And so I think a lot of other mushers have now used that term too. And then they go and they start racing at that last half on the west coast of Alaska. And that has done very well for the last several years. I personally think that those that go in with a strategy and stick to their strategy have a better chance most years, but you also have to be flexible and understand and kind of train enough that if something changes, you can keep up. Or if the weather changes, you can change your plan to benefit your team and keep you in the running. That's for the front runners. For those that are here wanting to experience Iditarod, wanting to gain experience, their strategies are completely different. They're just trying to keep their dogs happy and get themselves to Nome. So it's a little bit different for them. But for the front runners, you either have the high risk, high reward, or crash in some teams, or you have that more what's considered conservative style. I don't know what the benefit is either way. Each musher and each team is completely different, and as long as they've trained for it, they've got a good chance.
And the only other thing I like to add is there is definitely a strategy towards this for some of the prizes that are offered along the trail, especially here right as we move in between that first and second, third. You'll often see mushers that don't really have a chance to win the race, but who may be very solid middle of the packers, make a real run for some of these bigger prizes. And when I say prizes, there are some checkpoints along the trail that give $3,000 or $4,000, and others give away other things that may be beneficial to them if they know that they're not going to be in the running for big money at the end. Is that right, Toni?
That's it. Yeah, I think it's more bragging rights than the actual money, because we all know that, the $3,000 might be nice, but that's not even going to pay back your entry fee. But it'll help a little bit. But I think it's more just to show that, yeah, my dogs can run with the big dogs. And you do kind of want to see your name on that awards list come the banquet in Nome.
Right. And speaking of that entry fee or those costs, just a perspective from a musher. Here at our kennel, we have 36 sled dogs, and we have a dog food bill of just shy of $2,000 a month. So $24,000 a year to feed our sled dogs. And I always ask myself, if I did not have sled dogs, what in the world could I do? I could probably have a yacht, a plane. I could have a second home in Hawaii. I could have a lot of things for that extra $2,000 a month. But that's the price we pay for the life we live. And I think a lot of people will find real insight to that, because it is a very expensive lifestyle. And as you said, it's mostly bragging rights. But if there's any way of making some of that money back, there is a way to do it for sure. So, Toni, let's jump over. I wanted to talk about legacy teams today, legacy and dynasty teams, but I'm going to hold back on that because I'm sure we have plenty of time to mention that in a later show. But we want to talk about our musher profile of the evening, which happens to be one of those legacy or dynasty families, and that is the Smyth family and Ramey Smyth. What do you know about Raymie? And then I'll add my part.
Well, I can remember when Dallas was running in 2012, and it was looking like he was going to win, which spoiler alert, if you haven't watched that season yet, he did end up winning. That was his first win. And I only bring this up. I know people are tired of hearing me talk about Dallas, and I apologize. But I only bring that up because I was working at the time for Mitch. And so I was reporting on that run. And Danny, Dallas's older brother, was on his way to Nome when Ramey Smyth made his move and started eating up the trail and coming up behind and passing quite a few teams. And so Danny called. He was in Kotzebue, and he was asking for an update. What was the GPS tracker saying? Where was everybody? And so I start listing who's where, and I mentioned Ramey's name, and there was dead silence on the phone, and I thought I'd lost him due to bad signal. And he's like, "No, I'm here." He's like, "Okay, wow, let's rethink this here." He's like, we don't want Raymie behind Dallas, because everyone in the mushing community apparently knows that if you have Raymie or his brother Sim behind you, they can run you down. I heard Nick Petit one time say that he was convinced that Raymie took his boots off and put on running shoes to run that last leg from safety into Nome. So that's always kind of stuck in my mind that, the Smyth dogs finish strong, and that's what you like to see. I believe Ramey's won quite a few of the fastest time to Nome, which the top 20 mushers, I believe, are up for that award every year. That just goes to show that he does great dog care all along the trail for them to be the speediest and peppiest team to the finish line when most other teams they're ready to get off the trail and take a big break. His dogs are running down a little bit faster.
Yeah, Raymie has been running this race for a long time. I'm looking at Iditarod.com. Mm-hmm. He started his first race in 1994, so a heck of a long time ago. And I always like to look at the total prize money. We were talking about that earlier, about the cost of Iditarod. It looks like Raymie has earned $593,475.33 in prize money in his career. So he's been in the money a lot of times. And like you said, he is a perennial front of the pack type musher. And not only that, but he is one of those faster mushers out there, especially if all goes well during that last third. He can be a force to be reckoned with and definitely chase down those other front runners. A couple of quick facts about Raymie. As I said last night, he lives not too far from us. They are one of the very few families that use our trail system here on the east side of the Parks Highway. He is a phenomenal log home builder. He has a log home yard just right down the road from us, in between here and the Willow Restart. And he's built several homes right here in the neighborhoods around us. And my goodness, if I had that talent, that would be something else. We talked briefly about his brother Sim. I think they're pretty close in age, but they've often run Iditarod together. I think Sim still lives in the Big Lake area. But what's even more fascinating is his father, Bud. And I know Bud has passed on, but he was one of the early Iditarod guys, and there are some infamous stories about Bud. One that comes to mind is, I guess he started off on fourth there at the ceremonial start with a cooker or something that was going. What is that story? I'm probably butchering it a little bit, but I guess he had a chimney sticking out or something like that.
You know, I think you know more of that story than I do at this point. My brain is fried after this weekend. But yeah, no, Bud has some stories, and I've really enjoyed. I haven't really followed a lot of the Trailbreaker stories, but I have been in the last few months trying to get into the spirit of the 50th, and there are some stories about Bud that you're just like, that's Iditarod.
Yeah,
that's an Iditarod musher.
That is, and I'm looking forward to telling some of those stories. I don't think we've told a lot of those stories on our coverage over the years, because that truly is Iditarod, especially those really old school stories where it took 2.5 weeks to run the race. And I know that Bud was infamous for that. He reminds me of Grizzly Adams from back in the day. He just had that aura about him, if you will. And I got a chance to meet him and speak with him on several occasions. But quickly back to Raymie. He and his wife, as I said, run right here on our trails. They are very involved with the local community, and their family is very, very important to them. They're raising their kids in Mushing, which goes back to that dynasty or legacy type family. I believe their daughter ran either in the Willow 100 or in the Junior Iditarod. I'll have to check which one that she ran. But I remember when I first moved here, I was looking for mushing jobs, and I met up with Raymie, who was probably the first musher I ever met when I moved to Alaska. And I remember going over to his place, and at that time, Toni, his kids were still toddlers, and now they're teenagers, and they're still involved with dog mushing. So very cool family, and you're right, like you said yesterday, he doesn't get a lot of press. He's one of those quiet, keep your head down type guys. He's not flashy on Facebook or anything like that, but he's one of the favorites out there, isn't he?
Yes, he is. When he came through yesterday, there was a big cheer as he went down the chute. So it made my fangirl heart happy to hear that. I do think that we also need to mention his mom. She's also an Iditarod legend and trailbreaker. She was one of the first women to run the Iditarod. There were 2 in the second ever Iditarod, and she ran that race and finished, as well as running in 1984. She didn't finish. I don't know what the story is there. I just happened to look that up this afternoon. So I kind of want to start a deep dive on that. But the Golden Harness Award is actually the Lolly Medley Golden Harness Award. So they named the award that's given to the dogs that are voted in as the Golden Harness winner at the Musher's Banquet. So it's named for her, which I think is just such a cool honor. And I know that Raymie is very proud of her accomplishments as a musher. So I did want to give her a shout out, as well as his wife, Becca Moore, who ran the Iditarod while pregnant.
Yes.
With their youngest daughter. So he's got strong women in his family.
Right. Yeah. You know, I did not know that story about his mom and the Golden Harness, probably because the name didn't make the connection for me, but that is
right.
That is a cool story. Very cool. Well, we talked about Ramey Smyth tonight, and I don't remember if I said it was going to be me picking or you. Which was it?
You said you, so I am not prepared to pick a third time.
Okay. All right. Let's pick, and I'm just scrolling down the list a little bit. Let's pick. Let me ask you this: should we do a male or a female?
Well, we've done one of each, so I don't think, I think our listeners like to hear stories on the women, especially the ones that don't get a lot of coverage. So, all
right, so how about we do Ryan Olson? That's a very interesting story of itself. She happened to be on our show several years ago, I think when she was still working for SP Kennel way back in the day, right when she was doing that first Iditarod. So I think that will be an interesting story. How about that?
I like that. One of her big sponsors is a company that is from down here, so I'm all for it.
All right, so tomorrow night, guys, we're talking about Ryan Olson. She is up in the Fairbanks area. Very cool stories about her. And be sure to check it out on your own. See what you can find out about our musher of the day for tomorrow, and maybe share some of that information with us so you can be a part of the action. And I think that that's what's part of a podcast versus some other type of social media. We can answer your questions and bring your comments on the air as well. Toni, did we miss anything before we go?
Nope. Anything that we missed, I think we can cover later on. I think we've done a lot tonight.
We have, and we're always looking forward for story ideas or those questions, so please pass those along. We are on day 4 of our coverage, and it's only the second official day of Iditarod. They've only realistically been on the trail for real for about 26 hours as the time we're recording this. So as we said earlier, it's a 24-hour cycle, and it will be interesting to see where folks are at tomorrow. And as we mentioned very quickly before we go, you're going to start seeing those 24-hour rests before too long. I don't know about as early as tomorrow, but I guess possibly it is. With that, we look forward to tomorrow here on the show. And on behalf of my co-host, Toni Reitter, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From DogWorks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for DogWorks Radio.
So earlier, you learned about First Paw Coffee Company. Now I'm going to tell you about its Trailbreaker Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Trailbreaker Blend is inspired by our love of the Northern Lights, frosty paws, and sled dog trails. How cool is that? The Trailbreaker Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It's a medium dark roast from Central and South America, highlighting flavors of brown sugar, hazelnut, and plum. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.